Hello, English 1A. This is the third video in a allegedly two-part series. So this is about the introduction and conclusion paragraph in your research argument essay. The first two videos are about the introduction. That's introduction 1 and introduction 1.5. And then we have the final part, which is the conclusion that I hope to fit in all of it into one video. So the conclusion paragraph is the goodbye message to the reader. You want them to remember your argument, feel like you proved it, and feel satisfied that it was a good thing that they spent time reading your argument. But then they need to walk away, right? This is all about how to do that in the most persuasive way, because the conclusion is the end. And then watch, the guy's gonna disappear. He left. All right, so purpose of the conclusion. The purpose of your conclusion is to review your argument and indicate to your reader why your argument is valuable to them. You want the reader to feel that your argument is memorable, logical, and worth the time they spent reading it. Like any piece of writing, basically, the reader could be doing 100 other things. They could be going to like a concert, they could be taking a walk, they could adopt a dog, whatever it is that they're doing, but they're deciding to spend some of their time reading you. So it's a gift that they are giving you, and you want to make sure that they feel seen in the last paragraph of your essay. The one thing I do want to emphasize again, it is one paragraph. With these essays, they're very structured, and it's a pretty strict container to put your ideas in. But basically, if you want to make sure that your paragraphs are distinct from each other and there isn't a lack of unity or introduction running into a paragraph, you want to just have one paragraph introduction, your body paragraphs, and the counterargument paragraph, and one paragraph as well for the conclusion, parts of the conclusion. So the first is the signal. The next is the restatement of the thesis. The next is the highlight reel. Then you revisit the hook, and then you state the wider significance. So we'll talk about each one of these in this video. Let's first talk about what they're supposed to do. Okay, so the signal is supposed to indicate the end times. You know I'm sort of obsessed with apocalypse, but anyway, the end times for the essay. It's a simple phrase, like to conclude in something like that, to let them know that this paragraph is different from all the others and we are getting off this ride. The next thing with the restating of the thesis, you've proved it at this point, hopefully. So you want to restate it to remind them of, remember way long ago when I had an argument I was trying to make? They've had to go through all these body paragraphs and evidence and analysis. You want to remind them of what this was all for now that you've proven it. The highlight reel, this is the proof of your proven thesis. So you go over some of the best parts of your essay, like a little bit for each point you made. Again, very concise, precise version of it. Then you revisit the hook. This is letting the reader know that you didn't forget about the guy in the story that you introduced the argument with. He's going to have a conclusion to his story too. Or if you ask a rhetorical question, it's not going to be totally rhetorical because you're going to provide some sort of answer or at least thought that wraps up that idea. So this lets the reader know that you are not leaving loose ends here. You want to revisit that and finish whatever you started at the beginning. And then last, this is the gift to your reader, the wider significance. Why did we put them through this? Why did they have to read this? And the reason is based on something about this argument being part of a larger issue or somehow connected to them. So we make it matter, and that's the gift your reader gets for reading all of the other sentences. So the signal, let's go over all the parts. The signal is basically you're going to let them know that this is the beginning of the conclusion. Since your reader has been through a lot of detailed information in your supporting body paragraphs, you want to use this short phrase, which lets them know that the argument is now over and the concluding paragraph. It should be paragraph or beginning. There's a typo there. If you see any other typos in the video, just let me know and you'll get an extra credit point. Okay, so common signals that people use to sum up, in summary, to conclude, in conclusion. There are a bunch of different kinds. So that's a pretty simple part of it. Another reason why we have the concluding signal is because what comes after it in the same sentence is typically the restatement of the thesis. We don't want the reader to confuse it for a topic sentence for a body paragraph. So next you will want to restate your thesis to remind your reader what the overall point of your argument was. So that's pretty straightforward. You can mix up the words a little bit, but don't make it too different because you want them to have that echo. Especially, we talked about the first read, how people are gathering information and trying to figure out what this document means. We're also trying to persuade them at the same time. So a little bit of resonance between the thesis topic sentences and the restatement of the thesis is, it encourages their mind to remember the pieces. After that, we have the highlight reel. When you want to summarize the best points that you covered in your supporting paragraph or highlight your main points. By doing this, you will reinforce your argument by reminding the reader of some of the best evidence that you provided throughout your argument. One thing to be careful of with this highlight reel, it's just the highlights, so you don't want it to go on super long. And granted, I'm sure your essay is full of highlights. You want to pick just, kind of go over like one for each supporting paragraph, and keep it really concise. Because again, like when you say, hey, imagine getting, we're landing a plane and you want to get off the plane because you've been on the plane. It might have been a lovely ride, great movie. Perhaps there was good food. Maybe you met someone interesting, but you want to get going where you're going. So keep it short. Highlight reels. So I have a comparison here of the highlight reel from the Walmart essay, and then also the topic sentences for his supporting points, just so you can see that they're different. I will have this in a handout that I will attach also to the page that this goes on. Walmart not only creates jobs, but also helps other businesses in this community by attracting consumers from other towns and communities. So this is something that he said, in the essay, right? So in addition, towns which host Walmarts have greater opportunities for businesses than towns that do not host Walmarts. So we have over here, if you can see that these are kind of different, right? These are based on the evidence. In addition, Walmarts can save consumers money, which in turn, it shouldn't be can causes, another typo, can causes these savings to filter back to small businesses. So we have, they represent things that he said about each one of these points, is the point. Then the revisiting the hook. By revisiting the hook, you signal that you are careful to make sure all matters are resolved. It also functions as a transition to the statement of the wider significance. Sort of like how we have the transition to the thesis in the beginning, we are moving the reader into the argument there. What we are doing at the end, though, we are transitioning them out of the argument. This is where you can make actually bigger statements that if they were a thesis, I would say like, oh my gosh, that's too broad, you need to narrow it down. Since you've proven your argument, you get to say bigger things because you kind of, proved your street cred, right? So strategies. If you began the argument with the story, finish the story. Again, concisely. If you began an argument with a surprising fact or statistics, refer to that statistic and explain why it is significant now that you've actually proven your argument. If you began your argument with a quote, revisit the quote and explain its wider significance as it relates to the thesis statement. And if you proposed a rhetorical question, provide some type of answer which is related to your thesis. Again, all this is going to be on a handout attached to our Canvas page. All right, so the hook. I think part of it is actually outside the screen, which is unfortunate. Anyway, so the hook in the introduction versus the conclusion. As you remember, there was a hook. I'll just tell you what's in the introduction. The hook was all about telling the story of Danny Davis, who had a town where all the businesses had left. They had a steel mill, and some money was down. Young people were leaving, but then Walmart came to save the day, right? So that was the introduction. So here's how the story ended. It has been 5 years since Governor Danny Davis signed the papers to add a Walmart into his region. Since then, some of the citizens who lost their jobs at the steel mill have had the opportunity to work at Walmart and stay in town. The local restaurant Aunt Carrie's has expanded their business by adding a brunch menu on the weekends for the local consumers from out of town. So basically, hooray, Walmart saved the day. That's sort of where that's going, just much more eloquently. So anyway, you can see that they're returning back to Danny like, hey, you know, in the beginning, you wonder if Walmart's going to do anything because he hasn't signed the papers yet. Then you have your argument talking about the benefits, and then in the end, you just say, so now all of his problems are sort of solved, right? Anyway, okay, so the wider significance statement. These are some tactics that you can use. You want to indicate to the reader why the argument matters to them. So you relate the topic directly to your reader. Like, let's say if it was about college education, it would be relatively easy to do for us, for you guys as college students. So you want it to actually be something that the reader could potentially like have in common with you. Like, you don't want to, you know, if you have an argument about serial killers, you don't want to say like, so now all serial killers are, you know, you pick something else, a different tactic. You could relate the topic to a larger issue. You might be able to do that with the serial killer paper. But basically, if you're, like, for example, if you're talking about a specific, like, welfare program, like, you could talk about welfare programs in general. If you were talking about a specific type of school, you could talk about schools in general. Or if you were talking about, like, rental housing, you could talk about, instead of one region, rental housing in general. That kind of stuff. So you could say, what does this example say of the larger picture of all the things that are related to this specific topic? That kind of thing. The next is you relate your topic to a larger insight that we can gain by exploring this topic. So if it's a starter, like let's say it's relatively new research. So now that we know that this is a problem, here's what we need to do. You know, we need to go like research more. We need to open up more categories of information for this, etc. And then finally, the call to action. You would never want to do this at the beginning, but if you have proven your argument by the end, you can totally stand up and do this. So tell your reader to do something, you know, like if it was, for example, you know, like homeless encampment sweeps, you know, you could call them to action by the end by saying like, you know, so you need to talk to your city council person and indicate to them that the, you know, violence of these sweeps and the cost of these sweeps is just not worth continuing them, that they're you know, they're awful. So that would be something that you could call your reader to action. And so we have examples of these, and this is the, oh, and still it isn't on, it's not on the page. We had one from the child obesity essay. You can find that on the website. We also found that one was a call to action, which basically said, parents, be educated and don't overfeed your kids, or, you know, do the things that make them have difficulties in the house. The next one, the tent cities. This one was an example of relating it to a larger issue. So it was the tent cities that he was talking about in the essay. He talked about the plight of homelessness in general and ways to battle it. That's called vortex, that transition. So in conclusion, oh, how'd that picture get there? In conclusion, basically your conclusion needs to wrap stuff up in your essay. You have a bunch of different ways that you could do it. But you want to make sure that the order of everything is the same. You know, you want to have the signal, the restatement, the highlight reel, and then you want to move out of the essay, end with the wider significance. But basically, these are important because this is the last thing that your reader is going to remember. And a lot of times, the conclusion is really all they remember a couple days later. So make it matter, make it good, edit those sentences, and public land for sanctuary. All right, that's it.